Many people recognize this pattern. After long periods of scrolling, the mind feels unsettled. There may be a subtle tension, a heaviness in mood, or a vague sense of agitation that was not clearly present before. The activity itself does not seem dramatic, yet the emotional tone afterward can feel different. In recent years, large-scale surveys and meta-analyses have examined the relationship between problematic smartphone use and mental health indicators such as depression, anxiety, and stress. Across multiple populations, researchers consistently observe associations between higher levels of dysregulated use and elevated emotional symptoms. In this episode, we'll look at what research suggests about constant scrolling, stress, and mood, and how digital overstimulation may interact with emotional regulation systems. Later in this video, we'll examine how large cohort studies describe dose-response patterns, and why researchers increasingly frame problematic smartphone use within models of stress and vulnerability. The phenomenon under discussion is not ordinary phone use. It is persistent, dysregulated engagement, often described as problematic smartphone use, or PSU. This includes difficulty controlling use, preoccupation with checking, and repeated scrolling despite negative consequences. Researchers are interested in this because smartphones combine multiple emotionally salient elements: social evaluation, novelty, unpredictability, and rapid feedback. Each of these features can activate attention and reward systems. When repeated frequently, they may interact with stress pathways and mood regulation. A 2023 meta-analysis synthesizing 38 studies examined associations between problematic smartphone use and symptoms of depression and anxiety. The pooled results showed small to moderate positive correlations. In other words, individuals reporting higher levels of dysregulated use also tended to report higher depressive and anxious symptoms. The authors interpret these findings cautiously. They suggest a likely bidirectional process. Individuals experiencing anxiety or low mood may turn to their phones as a coping strategy. At the same time, certain patterns of use, especially repetitive, uncontrolled scrolling, may intensify stress, sleep disruption, and negative affect. An Australian survey of approximately 700 adults reported a dose-response pattern. As smartphone use increased, particularly when it met criteria for problematic use, reported levels of depression, anxiety, and stress also increased. Sleep quality declined as well. The relationship was not binary, it followed a gradient. In a UK cohort of adolescents aged 13 to 16, problematic smartphone use scores tracked with anxiety, depression, and sleep difficulties over a 4-week period. Importantly, qualitative interviews revealed ambivalence. Teens described both positive mood effects and negative emotional consequences. Many acknowledged benefits of connection and entertainment, yet also reported feeling distracted, less productive, and occasionally overwhelmed. A 2025 review examining the broader psychopathology literature concluded that excessive, dysregulated smartphone use is reliably linked to elevated stress, anxiety, depressive symptoms, and sleep disruption. The authors frame PSU not as a single cause of mental illness, but as a factor that interacts with existing vulnerabilities. What is being measured in these studies are symptom scales, self-reported depression, anxiety, perceived stress, alongside smartphone use frequency and indices of dysregulation. What researchers observe are consistent associations. Higher dysregulated use corresponds to higher emotional distress. The mechanisms remain under investigation. One possibility is stress activation. Constant scrolling exposes individuals to unpredictable social signals, emotionally charged content, and rapid attentional shifts. These conditions resemble high cognitive load paradigms, which have been shown to increase sympathetic nervous system activation. Sleep disruption also plays a role. Evening exposure to screens can alter melatonin patterns and delay sleep onset, and sleep quality is closely linked to mood regulation. Thus, part of the observed association may be indirect, mediated through altered sleep. There are significant limitations. Most of these studies are cross-sectional. They measure use and symptoms at the same time point, which means causality cannot be established. It remains unclear whether heavy scrolling leads to depression and anxiety, or whether individuals with existing symptoms are more likely to engage in excessive scrolling. Measures of constant scrolling often rely on self-report. They aggregate many activities: messaging, news consumption, video, gaming, without isolating the role of dynamic feeds specifically. Individual differences in personality, social context, and baseline mental health likely influence outcomes. Researchers emphasize that vulnerability shapes the relationship. Pre-existing anxiety, depressive tendencies, or social stress may both increase reliance on digital engagement and amplify sensitivity to its effects. What emerges from the literature is not a simple cause and effect story, but a feedback loop model. Emotional distress can drive increased phone use. Increased dysregulated use may intensify stress and disrupt sleep. Over time, this loop may reinforce itself. This reframes a familiar experience. Feeling more tense, more irritable, or more subdued after extended scrolling is not necessarily evidence of personal weakness. It may reflect interaction between attention systems, stress pathways, and emotional regulation processes responding to sustained digital engagement. The broader question is not whether screens are good or bad, but how continuous digital input interacts with systems that evolved for intermittent signals and slower rhythms. If you're interested in what science shows about human life, you can subscribe. In the next episode of Screens and the Human Mind, we'll explore how constant scrolling affects self-perception, and what researchers have observed about comparison, identity, and the way repeated digital exposure can subtly reshape how we see ourselves.